Hola, chess people. Coach Matthew back with another video, a chess quickie regarding the pawn scale, the value of the pawns. A couple of things. First, the generic pawn is a unit of force. 1. The generic pawn, generally speaking, pawn is 1 unit of force. The theme of the opening is center control. Now, the importance of the center never diminishes. In the prior video, we saw how the pieces prefer to be in the center. It gives them more movement options. This pawn scale applies to the opening. It also applies to the middle game, where the theme is the student at home, +1 if you said coordination of the pieces, piece coordination. Piece coordination is the theme of the middle game. Theme of the end game is promotion. So the pawn scale will change. Now, of course, pawns are not always worth the same. They are not static. As the game goes on, the pawn's value, each pawn, increases in value because the board opens up and the pawn may get closer to promotion. The rook also increases in value, as does the bishop. As the game goes on, those pieces increase in value. There's more room for the long-range pieces to, more space for them to use. So, that being the case, let's talk about the pawns and their value. Now, what about the center pawns? We've got the center pawns are on the central files. So the D and the E pawns. What are they worth? Well, center pawns are worth 1.5. Let's add that. Now, not together. Let me make certain of that. A center pawn. A center pawn is worth 1.5 units of force, 1.5. What about the bishop pawn? Actually, we have to click OK. And what about the bishop pawn? Now, the center pawns, they're in the center, and they can attack the center. The bishop pawn is not on a central file, but can influence the center. Here, the bishop pawns are the C and the F pawns. They do not occupy the center. They can't do it without an exchange, but they can attack the center. So the bishop pawn, how much is a bishop pawn worth? It is worth 1 unit of force. It's worth 1. Let's add that to our notes. You know what? Let's add some colons here. I should just make the text size smaller and fit it on one line. How about we do that? Is this text window going to get weird when I do this? I'm not sure if it's going to let me open this up. There we go. This channel remains a work in progress. Okay, how about that? Bonus point for me? No. Center pawn, 1.5. Bishop pawn is worth 1. Cannot occupy the center, but can attack the center. What about the knight pawn? The knight pawn are the B and the G pawns. Knight pawns. What are they worth? Well, think you may see a pattern. It's worth half. A knight pawn is worth half of a generic pawn, 1/2 of a unit of force. It cannot occupy the center, cannot attack the center. There's no direct influence on the center. Let's add that to our notes. .5. Now, what about the rook pawns? We're talking about the opening and middle game, the value of the pawns here. Now, the rook pawn, generally speaking, if there's going to be a weird pawn, I'm trying to find the cursor. Here we go. It might be a rook pawn. So we've got the A and the H pawns, the files where the rooks start the game. So the rook pawn is almost like half a pawn in terms of attack power. There is no square over here. You know, I3 sounds like a freeway. There is no I3. This square does not exist in orthodox chess. Now, these videos that I make are always about orthodox chess unless they're about a variant, and I will say that specifically. So there is no square there. Similarly, there's no square over here. So it only attacks one square and is far removed from the center. The rook pawn is worth 0.25. 0.25. Let's add that to our notes. So this is in relation to the center, the value of the pawns. This is the pawn scale. So when swapping pawns in the opening, in the middle game, keep the scale in mind. Now, in the end game, of course, let's say we're in the end game, do you want, if you're going to pack 2 pawns, you want 2 outside passers. So if we're in the end game, you want to give the opponent 2 weaknesses. This is a huge weakness for just one black king to solve. One black king cannot be able to stop both of these pawns. So as the game goes on and on, you get to the end game, this pawn scale is not a factor. Not just solely with the pawns. Now let's look at starting position. Okay, I'm doing reset, and it's not filling in the pieces. Once again, chess base can be bad sometimes. I'm clicking reset, and this is a chess. I'm not sure what I clicked on, but it should just reset the pieces. Why wouldn't it do that? My opinion of chess base is not what it used to be. Too many bells and whistles, and some of the bells and whistles don't work as well as they could, so why add more when you can just improve what you already have released? I would watch more videos about chess base on YouTube, but if I just watch one, I'll get spammed in the feed with a bunch of chess-based videos that I, quite frankly, don't want to watch. Or associated videos, whoops, from those channels. Anyways, so we have starting position. Okay. So with regard to the pawn scale, at the beginning of a game, how do we use it to help us make better decisions? Well, let's say you get in a time machine and you play Coach Hans Poschmann in Fremont, and you've got black. Coach Hans is going to play b4. He's going to play the orangutan. This move has several names: the Polish opening, the Sokolski, and the orangutan. Coach Hans would play this religiously. Now, what is he doing? What is he doing? Well, on a good day for the orangutan player, you're going to see pawn e5, and white will fianchetto and attack the pawn. So this e5 discovers an attack, and let's say that the trades happen. Let's go ahead and take. And now let's compare the pawns with regard to potential control of the center. So here, white has two center pawns and has traded a knight pawn, which is worth 0.5, in exchange for a center pawn, which is worth 1.5. So in terms of control of the center, potential control of the center, white has more potential control because they have another pawn there. Now, material is equal. Black is not lost, don't get me wrong. But on a good day for Coach Hans, if he's playing you and your time machine is working properly, he'll get this position. So when swapping pawns, keep control of the center in mind. e4, e5, d4, d5. The pieces prefer the center. If you control it, the opponent cannot use it, and you can use it against the opponent. Now, this pawn scale applies to the opening and the middle game. As the game goes on and on and on, the pawns become more and more and more valuable. This scale does not apply to the endgame. So when swapping pawns, keep the value of the pawns in mind. Thank you for watching.